Well, good evening, everyone. How you doing? I'm Lee Love. I'm your host here at Photo Mentor TV, and we do this every Friday night at 9 p.m. Eastern. Glad you could join us. Appreciate it. And if you're watching on the replay, we still appreciate you watching. And if you enjoy what we're doing here, we'd appreciate if you would join our YouTube channel at youtube.photomentor.tv. Subscribe to the channel there, click the bell, or like the Facebook page if you don't mind. And we'd appreciate it. Let you know what's going on during the week. We also have a number of social media accounts. So if you want to keep up on what's going on during the week, we post some information. My trusty sidekick there, Sue Ann, always does a great job of working there on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, or and keeping you guys up to date on what's happening. And so anyway, glad, hope you guys would join us there. The purpose of this show is to help educate, encourage, and mentor new photographers, really. Give you guys straight answers on all things photography related. Tonight is a special night, of course, not just that it's because it's October, but it's also because it is the first Friday of the month. And on the first Friday of the month, we do photo reviews. And this is a lot of fun. You submit your images, and we'll look at them. We'll give you feedback on them, and from both a technical, a storytelling, and a subject matter input there. So it's not whether I like them or not. It's really input on how to improve as a photographer, both creatively and technically. So anyway, that's what we're doing tonight, which is, again, a lot of fun. People seem to enjoy it. Oh, I see what's going on. I got one of my lights. I forgot to turn one of my lights on here. Not that I'm not better looking in the dark, believe me. Anyway, update the line. The line used to be have a face for radio, but I think nowadays it's a face for podcasting would be more appropriate. Anyway, glad you guys could join us. We're going to have a lot of fun, talk a lot about, cover a lot of different things tonight. And again, I see we've got some familiar faces, which is really nice. So we've got some new faces as well. Hello, Tracy. Glad you could join us from Washington State. And also a regular, which is really nice to see, our buddy Dean. Dean, I think, is in the UK, if I'm not mistaken. And so always nice to see you guys. And Tracy, to answer your question, yes, I did get your photo. So we'll be talking about that tonight. So anyway, let's see here. A couple things we're going to do tonight. One is I've got a handful of images that you guys have submitted that I'll go over and give you some feedback on. But the second thing I'm gonna do this first, actually. But the first thing I'm gonna do is go over a portfolio. I have a young lady who's a student who is out of photography school. She went to school down in Georgia, and she wants to be a product photographer. So she sent me last week, I think it was, or earlier, I guess it was last week, her portfolio of some of her older work, and she wants to update it and wanted my input on the kind of stuff that she should be using. So I thought it would make good sense to use this opportunity to let you guys kind of observe and peek over my shoulder and look at her images and hear the feedback that I would give her on doing her portfolio. I'll tell you, the first thing I told her was that whatever work you put on your website, you want to make sure it's work you want to get hired to do. So one of the mistakes I see a lot of new photographers make is they don't have a body of work. So they have maybe a couple of travel photos and maybe something of some friends and family. Maybe they shot a wedding for a friend, pictures of their kids, whatever it may be. And they put all of that on their website. Now, these are people, again, if you have a website, it's assuming that you probably are going to try and do this somewhat of a business, even if it's part-time. And my input was, never put any images on your website that you don't want to get hired to shoot. So I'd rather see you have only 10 images out on there, and there'd be 10 good images, the best of the best, as opposed to putting 20 or 25 both mediocre images and then also images that you are really not going to be hired to do or don't want to get hired to do. For example, the wedding is a good example where you might have a wedding photo. You may maybe like a few of them. So you'll post them because you think they're good photos and they took you a lot of hard work to create. But I'll tell you, if you do that, you're going to get calls to get wedding photography. And if that's not where you want to be, then you don't want to do that. The second thing, which is more important in my opinion, is that you want to specialize or at least focus. In other words, here's the analogy that I use. I'm big on analogy. If you guys haven't figured that out, if you're new here, you'll catch on. You decide you want Chinese food, so you're looking for a restaurant. Where do you go? You don't go to a Mexican restaurant. You don't go to an Italian restaurant. You go to a place that specializes in Chinese food, right? It's the same thing with sushi. You want sushi, you don't go to a gas station and get sushi. And the point I'm trying to make is when a client comes to your website, it should be obvious to them very quickly the kind of work you want to do, and the kind of work that they want to hire you to do. So in other words, they look at you, well, this person's a portrait. They're a really good portrait photographer because why? You have portrait work on there, and that's primarily the work you have. Now, it doesn't mean you can't have some additional work and you can't branch out a little bit, but it has to be clear to someone that doesn't know you, that's never been to your website, that's never met you, what kind of work that you want to do and what kind of work that you specialize in. Again, if you have a BMW, you don't take it to a Volvo mechanic or a Ford mechanic. You typically take it to a BMW mechanic because that's what they specialize in. So anyway, so we're going to look at Cassidy's work, and I'm going to kind of give her some feedback on this, and you guys get to kind of get some an insight of that. So we'll go ahead and start with that first, and then we'll get into some of your stuff. So she is what she's done is this is some older work that she did, okay, when she was first starting out. So she knows that she needs to reshoot this work, and she knows she needs to do a better job at lighting. So that I'm not critiquing the lighting, and I'm not really kind of critiquing the composition as much as I am trying to help her understand what work she should focus on and what work she may want to either redo or not use. So she sent me, let's see, 3, 6, 9, 12 images here to look at, and we'll go through them pretty quickly. So she's got this concept, which I think is a good idea, of combining things that don't go together. Old style appliances, from kitchen appliances and things, with things that don't fit. So here's a baseball that she's got connected to some kind of device that would maybe peel the potato or whatever it is. I'm not sure what it is. And she's using a baseball instead of a vegetable or fruit or whatever, a potato. So I think this photo is something she could use. I would encourage her. This is one that makes a little bit of sense, and so I would reshoot this with better lighting. And I would say this might be something that you want to include in your portfolio. The next one is, it looks to me like it's cotton, and it's in a blender. This is one, the concept is interesting, but it doesn't, I think there needs more work here. A lot of these images, Cassidy, I'd tell you that you want, here's where I think the breakdown is. Again, we've talked about the lighting. We know you need to relight them and reshoot them, but the problem is sometimes some of these are just a little bit too esoteric, and people don't get them. And so the other thing is this image here. I find that even though it says Kitchen Wizard on there, and it's a blender, or a food processor, it's a little distracting. So what you might want to do is Photoshop out. Keep the name Kitchen Wizard or yeah, Kitchen Wizard and Panasonic on there maybe, but take out the rest of that stuff in Photoshop so it's not as distracting. That would be one thing. The second thing is it's not really clear what's going on here. I don't understand. It doesn't, to me, it doesn't tell me why you use cotton instead of something else. Some of the others are a little stronger. So this is one that I would tell you to rethink and maybe not include in your portfolio. Here's another one. This is one where you've taken a cantaloupe and put it into a, it looks like some kind of a juicer. Now, again, it's not too bad. This may as a maybe, but the problem with it is you need on some of these, for example, like this one would be a good example. You need a full size, a regular cantaloupe, maybe cut open, sitting in the background to help pull the story together. It also looks like a little character, which you may or may not want to play upon. Maybe you were trying to do that, but the cantaloupe across the top, you know, kind of looks like a little face. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but if it is, then you might want to exaggerate that a little bit. But the main thing is with this one, as with some of the others, you want to have not just the item that has been mutilated, for lack of a better word, in there, but you want to have a version of those in there so it really helps pull the story together and they can tell what the item was before it was mutilated. So that's one. So this one's an iffy one. Again, the first one is a positive one. The second one with the cotton, not too sure about that one. You might want to wait on that one or keep working the concept. This one is a maybe. Now, this one was kind of an interesting one. This one I felt had a lot of potential because you knew there were cigarettes, you knew there was a martini there, even though there was tobacco in the glass. But and the metal bar is a nice texture, but it didn't really fit for me. So there's something here, but I also think the composition on this one is better than the others because you've got something going on in the middle, you've got something on the left third, the right third. So this one has, again, more potential as well. And this one communicates what I was talking about with the last one, in that because there's a pack of cigarettes there, you know what this item is, and now you can extrapolate what's going on with the rest of the image. Again, with this other one, the problem was if you don't know that's a cantaloupe, then it's hard to tell what's going on. So you would want to put a full cantaloupe or one that's cut in half in there in the image as well. This one you've got the cigarettes, so it pulls it together a little better. So this one's not too bad. So you might want to rework a little bit, but I think the composition is good. And I'm not sure about the steel bar. You might want to use something a little different there. But this one has potential. The next one is, again, you're running a banana through a pasta maker. I like the concept. And you've got, again, a full banana or almost a whole banana on the left, which helps pull it together. So one of the problems with some of these, and so this one is a possibility as well. I'd say you could probably continue to use this one, relight it, and see how that works. This one here is an example, though, where it's difficult to tell what's going on. And this is the problem with some of these. The concept is there, but and even if I show you, let's see, even if we go to the full screen, it's still a little difficult to tell what's going on there. And so there needs to be more to help tell the story. You know, you gotta assume someone that's seeing this doesn't really understand what's going on. They're not that insightful, and so you kind of have to lead them by the hand. Also, you might want to turn this shredder a little bit at an angle so you see the other two legs in the background or in the back. So it gives you a little more depth and a little better composition. But this one doesn't do it for me. Yeah, I don't really, I kind of know what's going on, but there needs to be more information there. before it fits that it works for me. So this one would be one I'd say I wouldn't include unless you can improve on it a little bit. This other one is an interesting one, the donuts here, and I guess that is some kind of I don't know what that device is. I'm not I don't do that much baking. And then you've got some staples in there that are in there. The other thing is I think you've got again some potential here, but it's a little too organized. It's a little too planned. So in other words, the staples and whatever the material is, the breadcrumbs or donut crumbs are a little too organized and too I don't know, too contrived, I guess. So you might want to look at that as well, not make it quite so positive. Also, I guess there's two bolts or two nuts in there, and I don't quite know where they fit into the image. I guess they're supposed to go with the mechanical device, but they don't fit, I don't think, where they're sitting right now. You might just want to stack them up there somewhere. But so again, this one is a little too, it's kind of too contrived, and I don't really know what's going. I mean, obviously you're smashing the donuts, but I don't know too much. And the Dunkin' Donuts poster is a good idea. That helps. But again, you could have that as a box, just an empty box in the background, maybe out of focus a little bit, that would still tell the story, but not be so obvious or so contrived. So this one here, I'll be honest with you, it's a meat slicer, obviously, and I'm not quite sure what's going on, but I like it. There's something about it that works. I think it might, obviously the lighting needs to be redone, but it's something to do with the composition and the way that this item is laid out. You're a little too close to it. Again, you're cropping the front legs out. Maybe, I don't know if you might want to include those, but there's potential here. I guess this is candy, maybe that you're slicing. But again, this one has some potential to it. So keep working on this one. I think you've got something there. If it's nothing else, the meat slicer has potential. There's something about that compositionally that works, and you could use that for a lot of different things. So on some of these, what I would say is what needs to happen maybe is they just need to maybe you need to get closer or turn them at an angle so you're looking down on them, so I can get a better idea of what's going on. They're all pretty much the same angle. They're all straight on. And it seems to me that you could do a better job if you also played with the angle a little bit. Like, for example, if you were going to do something with the food processor, why not be looking down on the food processor? Okay. And also, why not turn it on and have the motion in there with the slow shutter speed going on and it turning. And again, it probably wouldn't work with the cotton, but it could work with some kind of liquid or something that's going on. So showing me this from a different angle would make it more interesting. Not just this one, but some of the others as well. So take that as a consideration when you're talking about using some of these ideas, that don't just shoot them straight on, shoot them from an angle, from the top, and see if you can come up with something a little more interesting that draws the viewer in. So this meat slicer, for example, could be at an angle, and you could use leading lines to draw the viewer right into the blade. So here's another one that's kind of interesting. This is obviously oranges in a meat grinder, I guess it is. I like the idea of the stringy orange. So, and also I like the composition over on the left with the string going out to the right. But again, but now on this one, you've got it going. It works because you have the oranges there. So it's obviously, even if I didn't know what was going on in the top, I could tell by looking at the orange slices what's happening here. And so this one is a little better, and it's got potential. This one could be shot from this angle, But again, the meat slice or the meat shredder part, it looks a little kind of strange, and you might want to work on that a little bit. But anyway, I think this one would be one I would keep, and I would keep trying this concept. Okay, we got just a few more. Hang in there, guys. All right. Again, here's another one. This is kind of interesting. You got meat going into a toaster, which is kind of interesting. And I'm not sure, you know, I would like to see maybe if the meat was not steak, what if it was hamburgers, frozen hamburgers that were in the toaster, and you were using them like toast, of course, and they were going in the slots. I think that might work better than that, and I'd also may want to take the cord and bring it around the back, maybe it look like it's plugged in there to the wall to help complete the concept. But I would think that frozen hamburgers or something, frozen meat patties might work better than the raw meat that you have here. Again, you kind of lose me at the top because I don't kind of know, it gets busy and I don't quite know what's going on there. The having the steak in the front, oh, okay, I see, that's meat. I kind of get what's going on. I like the reflection. I assume that's a reflection. Yeah, reflection on the front of the toaster. That looks good. I like that. That works. But again, the cord kind of bothers me that it's not plugged in. I think if it was plugged in on right there on the right to a fake outlet or to an outlet, then it would help pull the concept together. And again, I would use frozen meat patties, not raw meat. But that's just me. And then the next to last one. This is interesting. These are tennis shoes that are on the stove. Once again, I kind of like the concept, but it's a little too busy. It doesn't really fit. The composition is a little odd. So if there's shoes there, then make the shoe, what's the hero, right? Make the shoe more the hero. So why not just have it in a pan, in a frying pan, and have it. I would have it frying. Not, you don't have to do it with the shoe in there, but you could take something else, meat or something from your other, fry it and have some activity going on, and then composite the. I know you're not a really big Photoshop person, but get some help on that and maybe composite the shoe in there to look like it's the meat patty. That might be a better way to go. But anyway, so this one, again, the pot and there kind of doesn't work for me at the top, but I think I like where you're going with the shoe and the stove, but I think it needs to be worked a little bit more. And also, I'm not sure that vertical on this particular image works. It seems to me like it might be more composite, more horizontal. And I see in the back there you have the controls of the stove. That should be in the picture, either out of focus if it's not that important, or composite where it might say 450 degrees. Okay, again, you want to kind of sell the fake. You want to bring that up so people go, wow, things really cooking, right? You want to have those numbers in the back on with something, and even if they're a little bit out of focus. The other thing you could do is the opposite. You could focus on the numbers and have them show 450 degrees and the shoe in the foreground being a little bit out of focus. And that would work the same way. So you could try it either way. The point is, again, you don't have to be so literal sometimes. You can just be conceptual, and that will work. And the last one, let's see what the last one is here. The last one is kind of interesting. This one I think compositionally works really, really well. And I like that it's a pineapple. It's in a vase, or in a vise, not in a vase. And also, if you notice, you have a pineapple there, just like I was saying earlier. So I know it's a pineapple. I can tell what's going on even if I don't see the whole picture. But again, you could have even more of a pineapple or a full pineapple sitting there, maybe vertically with a piece of it sliced out, but show more of a full pineapple. to help fill that story. And also it would help with the composition on the left-hand side there. So anyway, that's my feedback on these. I think you've got some potential on these that you could go through and work on. You again, as we've talked about before, you've already know that you need to reshoot these, and you know a lot more about lighting now than you did when you shot these originally when you were in school. But I think, and a few of the concepts really work. I like the overall idea. I like the overall idea of showing the juxtaposition of things that don't go together. And I'm just saying I would work on that a little bit more to help sell that by putting a untarnished item in there with the one that's mutilated to help convey that to people what's really going on. You don't want to make them wander around the screen too much trying to figure out what am I looking at here. Why? Because then they get bored really quick. They're going to give you a couple, 3-4 seconds maybe, and then they're going to move on if they don't get it. And that's this one also kind of interesting. The pineapple looks like to me like a snake, like a cobra. I don't know. Maybe it's because of the foreground, the one on the left there, but kind of threw me off a little bit. So anyway, that is the deal on that. I hope that helps, Cassidy, and I will send you this video and you can take a look at it and we can discuss my thoughts and see what you think. Okay. Let's see. Again, remind everybody tonight we are doing photo reviews. And that what we just did there was one of Cassidy's student that is looking to build a portfolio for product photography, trying to do something a little bit different, which is great. You probably also, I should also mention, Cassie, you probably want to also have some regular product photography in there as well. Use this as your personal project, and then have some regular products, some ads that you would set up on your own that you'd want, that maybe you would, that a commercial client would buy or would be looking for. Okay. All right. Let's see here. Anybody else got any other comments, questions before we move on? Okay. I know there's a little bit of a delay here, but if there is, we can come back to you. Okay, guys, so let's look at our first photo review. Bring up my notes here so I know what we're talking about. This one was presented by BL. BL has been shooting for about 5 years. And I'm gonna warn you guys right now. It's not fair to send me photos of really cute kitty cats, okay? Because I have cats. I've had many cats. Lost one of my best cats, boy, about a year ago, and I still miss him. So it's not fair sending me pictures of kitty cats because they go to the top of the list. So, but anyway, I'll try and be fair on this and give you guys a real review on what you need to do. But I love I may not review them, but I love seeing pictures of your cats. So thanks very much. Okay, so BL says, I've always been into wildlife, and seeing my pets communing with nature fills my soul with happiness. These are shots in our garden alongside the house. Bendy is the cat's name, and Bodie are just beautiful in this environment. So, and of course they are. He's really cute. What are you going to say? So let me kind of go over some things that you would want to do and some of my thoughts on this photo. So first of all, let's see here. I want to show you, I think it's this one right here. Yeah. Okay. So this is the untouched image that was sent in, and it's a great looking picture of a cat. It's a little soft. That's okay. It's not too bad. I mean, you can live with that. But what's the thing about the image that needs to work on, and you heard me say this before, and I'll repeat it many, many times probably tonight, and that is the question I ask myself when I look at a picture like this: what's the hero of the shot? Meaning, and that's my way of saying, what is the most important thing in the photo? Where do I want you to look? Where do I want the viewer to look? Where do I want their attention to immediately be drawn to? And that is a big mistake that a lot of people make, especially when they're starting out, is you include too much information. Now, it's okay to shoot a little wider because you may not know what you want to do until you get the photo in at home and crop it and look at it. But so it's okay to shoot a little wide, but you want to then, once you do that and you're doing your post-processing, you want to look at that and say, what's the most important thing? You'll hear me use the term squinting. It's not technically squinting, but if I were squinting, it would be like, what's the first thing I can kind of see of that picture? And that's what you want to ask yourself. So here's what I would do. First of all, first thing is I would crop this picture, okay? And I would bring it in to make it a little more, whoops, helps if I give you the picture, right? There we go. I would crop the picture in to make it a little more, again, the part across the bottom, the branch across the bottom and everything is interesting, but it doesn't do anything for it doesn't add any value to the picture. So what you could do is bring this in here, probably something like this, maybe bring it in a little down like this. And in fact, I think somewhere I have an exposure control. I guess not. Okay, so you could bring it in like this, and that would help a little bit, all right, and the cropping. Now, the other problem with is it's competing for your attention. Okay, your eye is always drawn to the brightest part of an image, the whitest part, the light. So the thing is, if you want to draw attention to bendy, then you want to kind of darken that background a little bit. So what I would do is I would add, somewhere here I thought I had this. Oh, okay, I just turned it off maybe. I would, thought I had it here. I don't know where it was. Well, anyway, I can do it anyway. So what I would do is I would try, oh, I see what's going on. Got this one on top. First thing I would do is darken the background a little bit. Now, the problem is if you do it too much, it's going to look too fake. So you have to go about halfway in between. In other words, you don't want to make it too dark. I could bring this exposure all the way down. Right now, this is down about a stop and a half, but I could bring it all the way down, but now it doesn't look quite right. It looks, people, oh, that's been photoshopped. So there's nothing wrong with Photoshop, but you don't want it to look Photoshop because then it looks like then they focus on the technique, not the image. So this is about a stop and a half again. So that helps bring your attention to the subject a little better. The other thing you can do is, again, you could blur the background a little bit. If you notice there, that's with it blurred, that's with it off. Now, I didn't do it too much, okay, because, again, if you really mess with it and go crazy, okay, then it's going to look fake. And then you'll be, oh, so that's too much. It doesn't look right. I mean, it would be nice if it was shot that way, if your lens had the aperture that would really make a bendy stand out. But because you don't have that, don't make it too crazy. Just a little bit. All you're trying to do is just make it enough so that what happens is blur. It's not, we're talking about bokeh here. We don't get all fancy with bokeh and lenses, but the blur gives tells the brain that there's depth going on, that this cat is closer to you than the background is. And that's what you're trying to do. Because without that, they look like they're on the same level, see? Look like they're right next to each other. Now, that's fine for certain things if you're doing, but for this picture, you really don't want that. You want a little bit of distance there to kind of make him stand out. Okay? So here is the original. Okay, and again, it's cropped. And then here's what it looks like with just a little bit of post-processing to bring the tension up there for you. So again, let's bring this up, crop just a little bit more. So again, if you notice what's going on here, his eye is right here on this 1/3 line, on the thirds line, rule of thirds line, and so is his face. So you've got this space over here at the end. In other words, if you were to crop it like this, it would be, he looked like you're looking, his nose is at the end of the frame, and you're like, what's going on? It's nice if you want to create tension, but we're not trying to create tension here. We're just trying to create a little bit of interest. So by leaving some space there, putting him on the right side of the frame, and leaving some space, it actually, I think, makes the image a little more interesting from a composition standpoint. So that is, again, the first one, and that's the before without the cropping and the after. Okay. So let's see here. All right, before I move on, see if we have any questions. I know, he's cute, isn't he, Sue-Ann? All right. Okay, so the next one image we're going to go to is this one right here. Let's see, I think, yep, there we go. So this image right here was submitted by MT. MT's only been shooting about a year or less, I believe. They didn't really give me that information. That's one reason I really ask you guys to please submit the images via the website, because there's a place for you to get that information. But I'm pretty sure that MT has only been shooting about a year or less. And it says that they took this off their back porch. They were having a bunch of wildfires, painting the sky. The sunset took their breath away, and it was so different. And so it was taken with a phone, and actually an LG phone. Now, there's some issues with this, and we'll look at that, and I'll give you some input on that. So first of all, there's some technical issues with the image, but don't get discouraged by the technical issues. And I tell you that because those are the easiest to fix, quite frankly. You can get a different camera, you can get a different phone, whatever it may be. This is not a critique of the technical aspects. While there are some technical problems I'll point out, that's not what I want you to focus on. I want you to focus on the aesthetics that I'm going to mention to you. Okay? So, let's start with the technical, though. Technically, there's some things going on. It's soft, obviously. It's out of focus, but that can be corrected. I mean, the little technique by holding the phone still, by holding it against a deck railing or a wall, and there's also some techniques I can show you on how to hold a phone that'll make it more steady. So that could be part of the problem. The other thing is, it might be that this was cropped. So it might have, I mean, a phone doesn't have much of a telephoto lens, so this might have been a wider shot that was cropped in, and that'll make it look a little blurry. But again, that can be corrected with just some equipment and some things like that. But the more important thing that I'm concerned about, I don't know what's going on here, is this right here. There's this, if you look, in fact, there's a streak coming down at the bottom here as well. There is some kind of framing thing going on here. I don't know if it's through a window or what the deal is, but see, it's red up to this point and then it's not. And so there's something going on there that you need to look at and see if it's something with the lens or something with the camera, or just because of the way it was processed. And you didn't mention whether it was processed or not. I'd assume it wasn't. But that's something I would look into, because the sky doesn't look quite right with this red going on. Okay, so that's one thing. The other thing is that if you look at it now here's the positive part. If you look at the composition based on a rule of thirds, it's pretty darn good, actually. Okay. So one thing you did really well here is using, obviously the sky is the most important thing, so that's why you want the sky to take up 2/3 of the frame. And so by using this right here, by putting the horizon line at the bottom, at the 1/3 mark, that told the viewer that the most important thing was the sky, and that's what you're really trying to show. Also, by having this tree over here on the right, maybe you did this on purpose, I don't know, but it also helps give some compositional interest to the photos. It's not all the same. And that also was a positive thing. So that is some things I would tell you to keep doing. Look at that. So what you want when you're doing landscape work, you want to make sure, if there's a lot of times you'll put things in the foreground. Now I know this was a horizon. I mean, I know this was a far away, and I know it was a fire, and so I know you didn't have much room there, but you want to decide whether you want something in the foreground or something in the background, or the sky is the most important. The thing you didn't do here, which was excellent, is you didn't put it in the middle. And that's the mistake that most people do. They'll just put the horizon right smack dab in the middle, and then now that will work once in a while, but the problem is that for the most part, that's the worst thing you can do. So you got to tell the viewer, is the sky the most important thing, or is the foreground the most important thing? Now, if the background is not that, or the sky is not that important, then I would say put something in the foreground. So if you look at, and I should have had some of his pictures here, some of Frank's pictures, but my friend Frank Ruggles was an amazing landscape photographer, and if you look at much of his work, I think some of you know him, most all of his images had some object in the foreground that drew you to the subject matter. So it wasn't just the subject, it actually, the composition was vertically, a lot of them, and there was a rock or stream or something in the foreground that drew you to the main subject. And so that is the other option here. Now, again, I know this is not the case on this photo, but if you don't have that interesting of a sky, or the skies, or you have an object there, a monument or some kind of landscape item you want to draw attention to, then put something in the foreground to help the viewer lead them to that. It's actually called leading lines is what it is. And it's used very commonly to help draw people's attention. Okay, so hopefully that helps a little bit. Again, don't worry so much about the technicality, because that can be solved and it's not that big a deal. And you can definitely take care of that. Okay, let's see what we got here. So the next one is an interesting one. This is well, this one was submitted by, let's see here, NA, and NA has been shooting for about 1 to 2 years, and they said that this is a macro shot of a plant. If you can't figure that out, a flower. Says they said, I like the symmetry of the 3 flowers and the shape of the leaves cut by the stripe. I think in black and white it makes the shot more about the shapes than the color, and I would agree with that. I think this is really, really nice image. I think you've done a good job on this one, and it's a little abstract, and it takes a second to figure out what's going on, but I think that has a lot to do with the fact that it's macro photography. And also, I would say that it also, let's go to this next one here. Sorry. It also does a good job of using the rule of thirds, even though it's sort of, it looks like it's in the center. The items are broken up using the rule of thirds, which again makes it more interesting. Instead of just one plant, or you know, making it horizontally, by doing it vertically, you really draw the viewer kind of from the bottom to the top, and they start exploring this the screen a little more, or the frame a little more. So I think it's really good on this one. I think you got a lot of potential. It would be interesting to see what it looks like in color, just for the heck of it, but I think it works. And in fact, you could probably even maybe increase the contrast even a little bit more to make it even more of a little more graphical. But I like it. It works good, and I think you've got some good composition there. It uses lines to it, and I think that works, draws people to the image, and also I think you use a couple different items to do this. I think I think it also uses the shape capability of shape. And if you guys aren't familiar with what we're talking about here, if you've watched any of the previous videos or reviews, one of the things that I use as a guideline to help you understand why I judge these images the way I do is I use the 7 most common design elements in art. Okay, and that's line, shape, form, space, texture, value, and color. And the reason I do this is because these things are meaningful. Our brain interprets them a certain way. In other words, if you look at lines, there's vertical lines, there's horizontal lines, there's squiggly lines. All of those mean something to the human brain, and we interpret them a certain way. For example, vertical lines, you'll notice, tend to denote strength, where a horizontal line does not. And a squiggly line, it kind of denotes to our brain chaos. And you'll see this in a lot of different categories. You'll see this in logos, you'll see this in type and text and design. So anyway, that's why I refer to these, because I want to use these to give you guidelines. So you know, these are not just whether I like the photo or not. I'm trying to get you to understand this is all about using the design elements to communicate. Here's my analogy. It's like a language. In fact, it is a language. It's a visual language. So if you're trying to teach someone Spanish or English, then you need to know, nouns, verbs, and the aspects of language, right? The elements of a language that make up a language. Well, this is exactly the same thing with using visual language. So you want to be able to learn what those tools are, how they work, and how the human brain typically interprets them, and that will make your images more communicative and more compelling. In fact, somebody asked me in the last show, I think it was, how do you tell a story using macro photography? And this is a good example. By using these tools, by using different elements in design, you can use these tools to help tell a story. And I'll show the next picture. I'll kind of show you. Maybe it'll make sense. Okay, so I hope that helps. Let me see here if we have any other questions on this while we're at it. Okay. All right. So the next image is okay. This next image was submitted by GM, and if you like this image, there's probably a good reason for it. This person is a working professional, and I actually know who they are, and they're very talented, both in photography and in video. But this was this person said, on the way back to the hotel from taking pictures all day in the South Island of New Zealand, a cold front came through and did this. They saw it, they jumped out, they took the photo. No post-processing at all. So obviously this is a pretty compelling image. It's beautiful, I think. But besides that, it works for a number of different reasons. And here, again, this is going back to what I'm talking about. So it obviously works based on color. Okay? So if you look at the image, and I'll show you here in a second, on the color palette, it really uses a more monochrome color palette, which is something we talked about. I tried to talk about last week, which I did a pretty poor job on. I'm going to repeat that show, I promise, because it's really important. It was on color, supposed to be on color, and it was because of the technical problems that threw me for a loop. So we're going to redo that show and re-record it. Anyway, so this image works really well because of the color. It also works really well because of the space. So when doing any kind of photography, really, if you can, but especially landscape photography, ideally you want to create three planes of existence, or three planes in your photo: a foreground, a middle ground, and a background. Well, this photographer used those three elements by doing that, by using light, by using the shapes of the objects and the color. It actually gave them, if you look, there's a foreground, a middle ground, and a background. And so that really comes through very strongly in this photo. And that's one of the things I think that makes it really work. Again, you could, as I mentioned before, the color really works. This would also be the same if you did it in black and white. It would probably work the same way. Okay, in black and white, we typically refer to it as values, not color, but it's still multiple shades of gray, and it gives you that depth. Again, the human eye, and this is what I'm talking about, the human eye perceives dark areas as further away and lighter areas as in the foreground. So by using those tools, it helps, gives you some dimension to your images. Okay, so let's look at this. So if we go back here and we look at this image this way, all right. So again, oops, turn this on. So the first thing is, again, very good use of rule of thirds. Okay, so from a composition standpoint, as I mentioned before, as the same way with MT's photo, and that it instead of using the horizon right in the middle, this person, GM, also did the same thing. They saw the sky was the most important thing, so they framed the image so that the foreground, or the horizon, was in that lower third, and that gave it much more dimension. It also tells you immediately what's the most important thing. I know quickly that the sky and the mountains are the most important thing, because the photographer left less room for things that are not as important, which is the foreground. Okay, so that's one element there that really works for this. Again, the other thing is the color, which I talked about. And if you look at, again, the color palette, as we did last week, we were talking about complementary colors, and this is a monochrome color, which usually uses 3 colors on a color wheel, and this one's got a few more in there, but still you can see that it works perfectly in that color wheel. And so all the colors, because they're all the same, this could also be called a triad, by the way. The same color wheel, 3 colors right next to each other, which is probably more accurate than monochrome. But that's why it comes across pleasing to us. When we look at it, I go, wow, this is really nice. It's a beautiful image, right? It's not just that the image is beautiful in the sense of the scenery, but it's pleasing aesthetically because of the colors. And that's what I was trying to get across last week, and help you guys understand how important color is and how it is interpreted by the brain and why it means so much. So this is a good example of one that really works using the 7 elements, one of the 7 elements of design, which is color. I'd also say it also works in the area of space as well. And of course, you could say be based on the mountains. It could also be using in the area of shape, which helps draw you to that as well. So anyway, either way, this is a great image. It works really well. It's got a lot of things going for it. And those are just a few of them. So, all right. Any questions? Okay, so Tracy Lynn, so when, let's see, what is Tracy asking here? Let me see here. Tracy's asking, so when someone like a picture, how do you shoot so quickly and get to, okay, excellent question. And an appropriate one, really. Very, very good, Tracy. Thanks for asking this. this is, well, first of all, this is one of the reasons why I'm not a big proponent. In fact, I'll take a lot of heat for it, of telling people, especially when you're starting out, mainly when you're starting out, but I don't shoot on manual. And the reason is shooting on manual requires you to adjust three things at least. Okay, let's say you're doing zoom. If you have a zoom lens, you're doing focusing. Okay, those are two. But then you also have aperture, shutter, and ISO. And all of those have to work together. Now, if you're just starting out, trying to understand how those work together can be very confusing. So my advice is to always shoot on either auto if you need to, if auto works for you. But if it doesn't, and you want a little more control, then I suggest you shoot on aperture priority. Now, aperture priority means that you're going to pick, the opening of the lens, and the camera and the light meter is going to evaluate the scene, and it's going to pick the shutter speed. And if you have it on auto ISO, it's going to select the ISO as well. So that means you only have to decide on one thing. Excuse me. Which is great. Now, and then I would say I shoot 90% of the time on aperture priority. Now, that's certainly not because I don't understand the exposure triangle or how to shoot on manual. I shoot on manual, but generally in the studio, or we're in a situation where no, the light is not going to change. I don't want the camera to make any adjustments. I want it locked in. But that's not the case on something like this. The light's always going to change. So you want the camera to keep updating as that information changes. As the light changes, you want the camera to update and say, okay, it's darker, it's lighter. A cloud could come across, okay, go dark. And if you're shooting on manual, you're going to get an underexposed image. Or the sun could come out behind a cloud, and now you're going to get an overexposed image. So by shooting on aperture priority, you're going to pick the aperture, the opening of the lens, and let the camera select the shutter speed and the ISO. Now, you can always override that. It's not like you're stuck there, and you actually still have to understand a little bit about exposure. I'm not going to get into it right now, but you still have to understand a little bit of exposure to do that. And that's why shooting on aperture priority would be my preference, especially for a new photographer. And something else I was going to add. I forgot what I was going to add to that. Sorry. So anyway, that would be my advice. Let the camera do. Look, you spend thousands of dollars on this cameras and lenses and all, and what do? You turn it into a 1960s film camera when you put it on manual. So that doesn't make sense to me. Use the camera, use the features of the camera, and learn how they work, but use them to your benefit. Use them to help make the job easier, not harder. So anyway. Another great question. So anything else? You guys have any other questions before I let you go tonight? Good stuff, by the way. Good images. Thanks very much for submitting them. And I appreciate, again, we do just a reminder, we do this on the first Friday of every month. So let's see. When is I should know this off the top of my head, but I don't. So the next one will be on November 5th. So November 5th, you can submit the photos anytime, by the way. You don't have to and this is a mistake a lot of people make, is they think, oh, this is live, and we do it on the first Friday, so they have to submit the photos on Friday. No, you can submit it any time. You can do them now if you wanted. I need them before. I'd like to have them before the Thursday, like the day before, by midnight. So, because I have to go through, work on them, as you've seen, kind of bring them in. I try not to do too much analyzing of them up front. I want to be fresh when I bring them in and do a review for you guys. So I don't do a lot of critiquing of them up front. I kind of try and do that the day of the show. And so anyway. And Dean says, he says, I tend to use manual with auto ISO, and then I choose my aperture rather than adjust the shutter for lighting if I'm in a rush, or if I have lots of variables I'll use aperture priority. And I agree with that, Dean. That makes perfect sense. In fact, what a lot of people don't realize is auto ISO. First of all, with auto ISO, most cameras allow you to go in and set a limit. So you can say it won't just go crazy. Say, I don't want it to go over 6400, for example. The other thing that a lot of cameras will let you do is the ISO will adjust incrementally, not in third or half stops. In other words, when you change your lens from one stop to another or an increment in between, generally you're changing a third to a half a stop. Well, when you use auto ISO, a lot of cameras will do increment. So in other words, instead of going a full stop, instead of going from 400 to 800, it may go to 420 or 450. So a lot of cameras will go in smaller increments, which means you're actually going to get a much more accurate exposure. So that's the other thing. And the thing about changing your aperture, your shutter for lighting is the shutter. The shutter will not. The great thing about using the shutter for changing instead of the aperture is it won't adjust your depth of field. That's what I was going to tell you guys. Thanks, Dean. You reminded me. So the reason I use aperture priority, people say, well, why do you use aperture priority? And the reason is the one of the most creative aspects that I have in photography is the depth of field. What's going to be in focus? So my analogy, and back to analogies again, if you haven't figured this out, if I'm doing a magazine shoot and I'm going into your business and I'm going to photograph you, and I find out there are two scenarios, one, and I don't know which they are going in. If I find out you saved a cat from out of a tree, and you have this hardware store, well, then the hardware store is not important to the story. If you notice, I harp on story a lot. So I want to probably take you out of that context. I may want some of that hardware store to show, but for the most part, it's all about the cat and what your heroic deed was. So I'm going to blur out, for the most part, the background. Okay, so therefore, I'm going to say, okay, I want to use a wider aperture. I may want to shoot at 2.8. But let's say, for example, you were hardware guy of the year. Maybe you got some kind of an award for being in the hardware business. Well, then the hardware business is part of the story. So if it's part of the story, I want to include that. I want a little more of that in there. I want to be able to tell that we're in a hardware store. So I'm going to use either an object in the foreground or I'm going to make the background a little more in focus. So this is the mistake that I think a lot of people make, is they don't realize that the background is just as important as the subject. It can make or break your photo. So by using your aperture setting, you can include the background or you can exclude it. It depends on whether if I'm in a busy background and I want to get rid of it, or I'm in a situation where I want to include that. So Dean is right in that using shutter speed instead of aperture is nice for just changing the exposure without changing your depth of field. But if you want to change your depth of field, then you would want to use your aperture. Now, again, this is not a photo class. I don't mean you have to sign up for Photo Mentor Academy if you want to do that. But the other thing to keep in mind is every camera has a button on it called EV, okay, exposure value, or some people call it exposure compensation. What that button does when you hold that down and and rotate one of the wheels, usually on the camera, it overrides the camera's metering system or what the camera says it is. So here's a scenario. You're shooting, it's winter, it's white outside, snow on the ground. You take a picture. If you notice, it tends to be kind of gray. The problem is the camera sees all this white, and so it's going to underexpose the picture a little bit. So instead of messing with your shutter, messing with your aperture, messing with your ISO, if you hold that EV button down, you can just override. Say, I want it to bump up a stop or a third of a stop. You just hold that down, make a change, you're done. And now that will tell the camera, I know you think this is the exposure, but I want you to override it. Either overexpose it or underexpose it a little bit. Anyway, that's a trick, and it's something you should look into. It's really handy if you're shooting on aperture priority or some other mode. other than manual. Generally, it doesn't. I know in Canada it doesn't work on manual. So, all right. Hey, listen, guys. As usual, it's been fun. It's been real. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope it was helpful. Be sure and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and I'd love it if you would subscribe to the YouTube channel. I'm going to ask you guys a question real quick, and see if you can. If you leave a comment, I would appreciate it. I'm getting a little annoyed with Facebook, quite frankly. That their stuff is just it's annoying the way it works. It's annoying to do the live video. I'm finding it's posting the videos more than once. People are commenting in places that are not showing up that I'm seeing. So we're thinking about keeping on Facebook, posting, the announcements and everything, but we're thinking about moving the videos only, the live video. There'll still be videos on Facebook. Thinking about moving the live video streams to YouTube only, YouTube and LinkedIn. So I'd love your comment if you think that's a problem for you. If you had to go to YouTube to watch the live stream, is that a problem? As I need to know that, because it's faster, it's easier, it's actually higher quality. Most people don't realize that Facebook is only 720. It's not a full 1080 HD. I can do 1080 going to YouTube, and the latency is slower, meaning the comments you make come back to me quicker. So anyway, let me know if that's a problem, if it's going to be an issue for you. Then let me know. And Dean, I apologize. Did I miss your photos? Dean says he thought I was going to share his photos. I don't remember. Did you submit them? This is the problem when people submit photos via email and stuff like that. I don't always get them, or they get buried. I think maybe you submitted some to Instagram. Anyway, send me an email and let me know. And if you didn't submit them through the website, let me know, and I'll make sure we get them in there next month. I apologize if I missed them. So anyway, your pictures are always great anyway, so it's not fair. Give these other people a chance. Anyway, hey, thanks. Enjoyed it. And again, we'll see you next week.